Hello, everyone, and let's get on it. Welcome to U.S. History. It's Friday. Woohoo! We don't have to go to school. Wait. Yeah. It's crazy. I want you to be glad when it's over, and hopefully it will be soon. I'm going to want you to read pages 583 to 587. Now, when you get to 587, I want you to stop before you get to problems at home, and I'll tell you a little bit about what else I want you to do here in just a little bit. But look at the maps. Look at like when the walls come tumbling down. That's very interesting. Reagan on the Fall of Communism, which is a great read. It's an excerpt from a speech of Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, Ronaldus Maximus. But Bush is elected as president. He got to oversee, and that's what you'll read about in some of those excerpts. He got to oversee the fall of communism in the Soviet Union. He got to oversee the end of the Cold War, which was great. After all these years we've been fighting it, finally the Cold War comes to an end, and we're victorious, as we generally are. But it was very interesting to see, and I want you to keep this in mind as we talk about Bush. When it came to foreign affairs, things dealing with other countries, Bush was really, really good at it. He was an expert at it. But when it came to domestic affairs, the economy, he was not as good. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't a Jimmy Carter by any means. Jimmy Carter. But he was not good. Not great. And so just keep that in mind. The economy is going to start to lag a little bit under Bush. And that's why Bill Clinton was able to get elected, that and H. Ross Perot, the combination of the two. But Clinton, and we'll talk about this when we get there, kept saying it's the economy, stupid. That was his slogan to himself, reminding himself, hey, keep talking about the economy, keep talking about the economy, because it wasn't as great as it was under Reagan. All right. Anyway, August the 2nd, 1990, a couple of years, almost 2 complete years of the Bush presidency, and a dictator by the name of Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein. He is the leader of Iraq, and he goes into a small country called Kuwait, which was very oil rich, had a lot of oil. And he just takes them over. Just goes in and takes over. And he stations troops along the border with Saudi Arabia. So America is looking at this as a twofold thought. First of all, it's wrong to just go into another nation and take over, especially when you're a dictator. And you may be about to go into Saudi Arabia. And the main problem behind all of that, and it wasn't just for this, but it was one of the main problems, let's don't kid ourselves, was oil. We got our oil from Saudi Arabia. We got our oil from Iraq. We got our oil from Iran. And we're afraid that, if this happens, we're going to have to go in back into the days of the 70s and the gas crunches and the gas lines and all of this stuff. That is why it's so important. And when you see President Trump talk about the greatness of America being oil independent, we make enough oil now in this country to cover ourselves. Again, we've mentioned this before, but when you're dependent upon these foreign countries, if they do something to the oil prices, bring instability to the region, NATO, back when they were the big dog on the block before America was independent, if they raise the prices, $20 a barrel, guess what? Our gas prices are going to shoot up. That's why right now gas prices are extremely low, because Saudi Arabia is wanting to mess with Russia, and they've lowered the prices and flooded the market. Or I'm told gas prices are low. I don't get to get out much right now. But so Kuwait is invaded by Saddam Hussein. And so we deploy some troops on the Saudi Arabian, or send them to Saudi Arabia. We don't put them on the border. But our hope is that, if we put them here, then they won't be able to go into Saudi Arabia. That's going to act as a deterrent. They call it Operation Desert Shield. And so we send those forces to Saudi Arabia, and we go to the United Nations. Now, I think I've talked before about my thoughts about the United Nations. It's a weak institution, they don't do much. But in this instance, they actually passed a resolution that said you can use military force to get Iraq out of Kuwait. Now, one of the things that Saddam had, and this is one of the reasons we wanted to go in, when he invaded Kuwait, he held hundreds of Americans hostage from August until December. Um, he called them guests. Saddam called them guests, but he hoped that they would add to his bargaining power. But he ended up getting rid of them or releasing them around Christmas of 1990. He thought that that might stay off an invasion from America since we had gone to the UN. And the UN had said, hey, you can, if they haven't voluntarily withdrawn by January the 15th, you can go in. So that was kind of the date set. Congress of the United States declared war on Iraq or gave him permission to go in on January the 12th, 1991. Now, it said this UN resolution, low battery again, 20%, my goodness. This resolution said that you could not invade Iraq per se. You couldn't take over Iraq. And you couldn't take Saddam Hussein out of power. Had to leave him in power. Why? Don't know, but that's what it said, and we followed it. January the 16th, the day after the UN said that we could go in if they hadn't withdrawn, we form Operation Desert Shield. And Norman Schwarzkopf was the leader. He was the general. And Stormin' Norman, a lot of people called him that. And they went in and began 5 weeks of pounding the Iraq military with bombs. They used stealth fighters. They used Black Hawks. They used all kinds of stuff. And they destroyed most of Iraq's, excuse me, it's not Corona, most of their military capability. The only thing that was left pretty much was foot soldiers when it was over. You see a cool picture on page 585. And one thing I want you to understand, this is the first time in history, and I remember this so well, and I'm sure that other teachers that you have that were of my age, which none are that, anyway, yeah, I'm the old guy. We watched this on television. Now, when you think about World War I, yeah, you know what I'm saying, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, all of those wars, people kept up with them on the local news or the national news at 6 o'clock. And they would talk, today in Vietnam, this happened and that happened, and that's what happened in Vietnam. We watched this on television. CNN was a network at the time, and that was back before they were all fake news. And they actually carried footage. They had reporters in Kuwait and in Iraq, and we watched this on television as we bombed, and you see the picture, it looked just like that. You would see these streaks across the sky. It was amazing stuff. And you had all of these Scud missiles, and you had our missiles. I'm trying to remember what they were called, but all kinds of things going on, and we learned all of this stuff about war. Now, this was the coolest war we had ever fought to this point because we are using air power. In the past, we would drop bombs to support our ground troops. This time we're destroying pretty much their capability to make war with an air fight. One of the things that you will see is when it was over, we lost 200 men altogether and women. 200 men and women altogether, 200 deaths. But you compare that to what it would have taken if we had gone in back in 1930, 1940 with a group of troops. We lost fewer than 50 aircraft, but we destroyed 4,000 tanks. We captured more than 500,000 prisoners in the end, and we defeated ultimately an army of 500,000. Now, what we did, after we had bombed them for all of these days, we have what we call the 100-hour war. Literally 100 hours of war. We did it on two fronts. We sent some troops in, and we were combined. It was a coalition. There were Arab troops, there were British troops, there were French troops, there were other countries that joined in a large coalition of troops. But we sent some of them into Kuwait, and we sent some of them into southern Iraq. And it was amazing to see the footage. There were soldiers. Now, some of them fought. Some of them dug in and some of them fought. And a lot of Iraqis were killed as a result. A lot of Iraqi soldiers. But it was amazing to see that some of them, large troops of Iraqi soldiers, would come out waving white flags. They just surrendered. Hey, we don't want any part of this. Don't shoot us. Don't shoot. And understandably so. On February the 27th, just 100 hours after the ground war began, President Bush addressed a television audience. You see this on page 586. I shall read it. Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met. No one country can claim this victory as its own. It was not only a victory for Kuwait, but a victory for all the coalition partners. This is a victory for the United Nations, for all mankind, for the rule of law, and for what is right. The kicker to this, and you'll see this come back later on when George W. Bush, the son, is in the White House. Daddy Bush never invaded Baghdad. And I think that haunted him to a certain extent. He didn't want to go into Baghdad, and if I remember correctly, Norman Schwarzkopf wanted to go ahead and do it while we're here. Let's go ahead and rid the problem, but Bush didn't want to do it. Anyway, you know that Saddam Hussein is going to stay over there for several years to come. He's going to cause problems. The UN wants to come in and inspect his military and all of his devices, and we suspect, the United States does, that he's making weapons of mass destruction later on, while W is in the White House. And it's going to cause us to go in again into Iraq. So this whole deal isn't over. But Saddam Hussein, or as Bush called him, Sodom, like Sodom and Gomorrah. He was making fun of him, and it was very offensive to him when he called him Sodom. So that is pretty much that portion. Now we're going to get into problems at home tomorrow, but this was a fascinating war. And what I want you to see, I have included actual footage of Desert Storm's first Apache strikes. We sent Apache helicopters in, and we shot up radar and shot up some other things with these Apaches. And when you clear the radar, then they don't know what's coming. And it talks about in the video, I think it was a 20-mile swatch of area. They had no idea what was flying over. And then we were able to just zoom jets in. And you're going to see actual footage, and you're going to see what they saw in the cockpit of those helicopters when they would fly and bomb. So amazing, amazing stuff. But please watch that. And I know it's Friday, but if you will get your book, and you'll read more about this, or hear more about it. I've already read a little bit of it. But page 149, it's chapter 26, activity 3. Maybe backwards for you, but it's okay. That's page 149. And then there are two questions on 150. You could probably answer them without even reading this, but don't. Two questions. There are the answers if you want to still shot it. And answer those, take a picture of it, and submit it. That is your assignment. Two questions. Listen, y'all have done great. I believe all of you have gotten your assignments turned in on time every time so far. Keep up the good work. Listen, continue to pray. God is in control. God is good. God has got this, and hopefully it will all be over soon. Stay safe. Stay away from others if you can. And know that I'm praying for you. I love and miss each and every one of you. I miss the conversations we have, the talks we have in class. And listen, if you need me, send me a message. If you have any questions, send me a message. Praying for your families, and y'all pray for me as well. I'm going stir crazy being stuck here at the house all the time. So we'll make it together. See you Monday.